rounding up connections and plugging in people and wires. So 2 minutes and we'll be running. Thank you. Okay, well, good morning again, and welcome. If we can just settle down and we can get proceedings going. Okay, there seems to be a constant stream of people still coming in, but we can keep going. So, welcome everyone. This is an auspicious occasion, as you very well know, the launching of my colleague, Associate Professor Cleophas' most recent book, Cricket and Cape Society. It's a micro-history of St. Augustine's Cricket Club, in which he makes links between history, community sport, and broader society. I think I just want to locate his work a little bit. You know, we in South Africa, and probably globally, but in South Africa in particular, we're always hearing these debates about why we should de-link sport from politics. But I think our collective South African experience has demonstrated that sport and politics are inextricably linked and to a large extent inseparable. Our contextual experience is almost like a living laboratory that attests to this ongoing, multifaceted relationship between politics and sport. Francois' work is located in a space where he has highlighted, lifted out, and given voice to underserved and marginalized communities who have been ignored by mainstream media. In this research, he investigated the St. Augustine Club's history and activities in a community organization. Now, just a little bit about community sport. I think community sport really pales into insignificance in the world of sport as we know it. High performance, glamorous sporting events, televised globally almost on a weekly basis. However, sport, clubs, and organizations all have their roots in communities. The existence of internationally famous clubs often can be traced back to the origins as neighborhood clubs and organizations, and St. Augustine's is an example of such a club. Now, a friend of ours, or colleague, Noel Goff, often said, research, or he wrote a little monograph, research can be seen as detective fiction, where you find evidence, you find clues, and the clues lead to more evidence. And so the thing spirals out into a bigger and bigger process. And I think this St. Augustine's process took that route and is a demonstration of how very complex human resource human research becomes a project that can carry on for a long period of time because of the richness of the data that is constantly, let's call it, unearthed or presented through various interactions with people. The big job, however, is to bring this all together in ways that are credible and ways that ring true. In other words, the work needs to have evidence of verisimilitude, right, where it rings through and sounds like this is real. Now that requires dedicated scholarly and intellectual work of a high caliber. And I believe that that is a hallmark of the book we are launching here today. So I want to, right at the onset, congratulate Associate Professor Cleophas on this publication and on this. Okay, so Francois indicated to me quite clearly that this book, like all research, is never a sailing solo process. And he wishes to acknowledge many people who have been part of the process. And I read from a list compiled by the author. It's quite a long list. It's 10 font and single spacing, and it came out to about 12 pages. No, sorry, only 12 items. Okay, I'm going to read from the list he compiled. Firstly, St. Augustine's Club, commonly known as Saints, for entrusting me with writing this book. There are many players, spectators, administrators, and interested persons over the years, so it is unfair to single anyone out. But thank you for making it possible to create a critical history about cricket in the 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries. Secondly, all the interviewees, too many to mention, but mentioned in the reference pages. I want to acknowledge, in particular, Professor Jan Wasserman and Professor Leslie Lagrange for taking time to encourage me by just listening. I know they also have busy schedules, but they always take time out for listening to me, 24 hours of the day, 24/7. South Peninsula High, in particular Mrs. Myberg, who always puts down everything when I come into her office. You can see page 206 of the book for St. Augustine's connection to South Peninsula High. Thank you in particular to Messrs. Brian Isaacs and Zaid Baker, who were the principals at the school when I started out with St. Augustine's history. A thank you also to the learners from Lavender Hill High School. Then, a special thank you my 3 PhD students, Dr. Roderick Williams, Vanessa Mitchell, and Natasha Lowe. You are my pride and joy. The Remembering SACOS Committee, thank you to them. They reminded me that we cannot reinvent SACOS in 2026, but we must never forget. This book is thus dedicated to Dallas Haynes and Frank van der Horst. Thank you for all the sacrifices that you made. On a personal note, thank you to my families, Cleophas, Small, Suleiman, and Heswick. You are all special to me, and I take up our family history seriously in a scientific and academic way. Also, thank you to Michelle Heswick for putting up with me. I don't know how you do it, but I love you very much. Whoa. For Art Esak, you are thanked for the publicity around the launch today. Dr. Valaydam, got it right? Dr. Valaydam, thank you for attending here today. David Forges, thank you for your support. You started off the process with Francois, and you're still here today. Thank you. And then lastly, thank you everybody for your attendance here today. I really appreciate your interest in sport history work being done at Stellenbosch University. Okay, to our program. Okay, so there's a number of people who will be making inputs here. People from the club, other individuals, and colleagues on our program. I'd like to call on our first speaker, Dr. Vanessa Mitchell, one of Francois' pride and joy, and I'll hand over to her. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Reddy. Good morning, everybody. I'm so happy that I'm one of your prides and joys, Francois. Really, really chuffed about that. Program Director, distinguished guests, colleagues, fellow scholars, students, sports people, family, friends. It's really a tremendous privilege and an honor, personal honor, to be here this morning and introduce Associate Professor Francois Cleophas. Now, Francois, can I call you that? It's fine, thank you. Francois and I met, well, I've known about Francois when he used to walk around with his duck-kiter, you know, and run that 400 meters, and as we all know, he still holds that junior record. I met Francois here at this very hall in 2019 when he launched his first book, Exploring Decolonizing Themes in South African Sport History, Issues and Challenges. And every time I come back here to SP, it's almost like we are completing a circle, but every time that circle just opens up again. So in 2019, when I met Francois here, when he signed his book to me, he wrote his phone number and his email address in there. Sorry, Michelle, it's nothing personal. I called him and I said, you know, I'm Vanessa Mitchell. I want to, you know, would you mind supervising me on my study? And we met Prof. Reddy, I think in what it was called Freedom Cafe. Bakery, Freedom Bakery, from 2019, and we've walked this journey with Francois, starting right here at SP. And I really want to commend Mrs. Myberg for opening up the space of SP to inclusive activities like this, to open up young people's minds, not only to education, but history in general. And I think there's this apathy towards history. You know, it happened in the past, why must we go back? But I think this is a very special place here, and my cousin's also here, she was also an ex-pupil of SP. And you know, I also kind of remember the 85's Bradley Van Niekerk, who was a student here and who was also imprisoned at a very young age. So SP has a very special place in my heart and my introduction to Francois. And I know when Francois said to me, I must say something, I mustn't say anything about him. So I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I must talk more about his work. So I'm going to try and not talk about him, but talk about the work that he does. So as I said, you know, SP is a very special place for me and that person, Francois. And we all know he taught here from 2009 to 2011, after which he took up his space as a professor at Francois, at Stellenbosch University. You know, there are moments in an academic career that really remain with you forever. And that was one moment for me, was completing my PhD under Francois' supervision. And like many doctoral candidates or master students, you will know that your supervisor can either make or break you. And I've had a really bad experience, but I've also had a really brilliant experience under Francois' supervision. Francois is a supervisor, a mentor, a guide who shapes the way you think about things. It's not just simple, this is the way it goes. He kind of makes you think and think different questions, how you interrogate and how you understand, and the responsibility that comes with writing history. So Francois taught me that history is simply not about recovering the past. It's about restoring justice to that historical record. So when Francois announced that he was launching this book, I just a few weeks earlier gone to an exhibition. I'm sure you all have seen it, the Long March to Freedom. It's close to Canal Walk, where they have these 100 statues that was curated by Dali Tambu. And there are 100 life-size bronze sculptures honoring what the curator terms as or regards as amongst the most significant figures in South Africa's history, individuals whose lives and struggles helped shape the nation's journey to democracy. And amongst those 100 figures is the life-size figure of Basil de Oliveira. Basil, who, as we all know, have heard, also played for St. Augustine's. So when I remembered the statue, and I'm remembering out of 100, there's only one sports figure in that. So I was both surprised that the figure was there, but also not surprised that it fits in exactly where it's supposed to be. But I think many more than one figure in sport history should be commemorated in that way. But the Basil de Oliveira story represents exclusion and belonging, discrimination and dignity, injustice and courage, and it demonstrates how sport can both reflect and challenge society. His inclusion among those statues is a powerful reminder that sporting achievements can transcend, and forgive me for using the cricket analogy, the boundary rope, and becoming part of a nation's broader struggle for justice, equality, and human dignity. And that reflection couldn't be more appropriate than today and the launch of Francois' book. Because Cricket and Society is not merely another book about cricket. It asks us to understand cricket as a social institution. And I think Prof. Reddy alluded to that when he spoke about this society, this community of sport, which I think is sadly missing today. And one that has shaped us and been shaped by politics, by race, identity, class, and power. It reminds us that every cricket field or every sports field is also a historical landscape. And again, Prof. Reddy mentioned earlier about this disjuncture or this idea that people say we must separate sport from politics, and we know we cannot do that, especially in a country like ours. So that has been the hallmark of Francois' scholarship throughout his career. Long before history became fashionable, he recognized that South Africa's sporting past contained enormous silences. Many stories have never been written, others have been dismissed as insignificant. Some have been deliberately ignored because they challenge dominant historical narratives. And I'm just sitting here thinking, and I see my uncle here, and my family will know that that man is an elephant. He remembers everything. In fact, Francois, I sent him some of the photographs you sent me, and he recognized a lot of the people in the photograph. So maybe I need to go and sit with Uncle Alec and write up that story as well. So that's the kind of influence Francois has on us. We want to kind of unpack and unearth those marginalized stories. So for generations, apartheid distorted not only people's lives, but also the historical record. Entire sporting communities were absent or are absent from textbooks. Non-racial sports organizations were overlooked, and again, Prof. Reddy mentioned SACOS. Athletes who excelled despite impossible circumstances were forgotten and are not recognized. And Francois, again, devoted his entire academic life to changing that, and this is why we are here today. So through painstaking archival research, and we've just seen the amount of references he used to write this book, over 17 years, I believe, but in those 17 years, other amazing things also came from the pen of Francois. oral history, historical analysis, he has demonstrated that sport in our communities is not absent from South African sport. They were and are systematically excluded from official recognition. And his work over the years has restored some of those missing voices and missing narratives. He has shown that history is never neutral. It reflects the questions historians choose to ask and evidence they choose to pursue. I mentioned earlier on that, excuse my Afrikaans, like dikkeite. So Francois himself embodies the relationship between practice and scholarship. So before becoming this amazing historian, he distinguished himself as an athlete, and we all know that in 1986 he set the South African junior national record in the 400 meters with a time of 48.9 seconds. Is that correct? Well done. So I think that deserves a round of applause. So his passion for sport therefore emerged on the field, on the track and later in the archives. Few scholars can bridge those two worlds of authenticity with such authenticity. So his academic contribution is remarkable in both quality and in breadth. Francois' research spans almost 3 centuries of sporting history, from the 18th century to contemporary South Africa, and crosses a range of sporting codes. You know, sometimes as a historian you focus on one particular code of sport, but Francois has, it's just amazing. I mean, his CV is as long as, I don't know, it's just amazing. So he's written extensively on 19th century, and I'm naming just a few of the codes of sport: tennis, athletics, boxing, cycling, gymnastics, hockey, netball, weightlifting. You haven't done softball, or did you do? You did one on softball, oh, you see. It's endless. So his scholarship demonstrates that no sport exists in isolation from society. Every sporting code tells us something about the communities that created it, the inequalities that shaped it, and the aspirations that sustained it. So in terms of that CV, Francois has published approximately 68 peer-reviewed journal articles, 10 scholarly books, and now the 5th one. Am I right? Not books. Book chapters, and now his 5th book, sorry. He has presented 68 conference papers nationally and internationally, and I've had the privilege of collaborating with him on a few of those, 7 to be exact. And we will do our 8th one this year in August. So those collaborations have been amongst the greatest privileges of my academic journey. Working alongside him has shown me that scholarship is never a solitary pursuit, and I think you mentioned it earlier on, this family of people who help you along your journey. And it is built through mentorship to intellectual generosity and a willingness to invest in emerging researchers. That commitment goes beyond supervision. Francois serves also on various committees, editorial committees, both nationally and internationally. Has reviewed countless journal manuscripts and written 26 newspaper articles, and I think this book has also garnered such a lot of publicity. I think it was in the Week in Argus in our local newspapers, and I think it's really important that these kinds of stories are publicized. So these are often invisible contributions to academia, all these things that Francois has done. Reviewing manuscripts, mentoring young scholars, and strengthening journals really attract public recognition. Yet they are essential to maintaining the quality and integrity of scholarship. Francois has contributed enormously to that intellectual infrastructure. His influence on South African historiography is therefore much greater than his publications alone. He has helped redefine what counts as legitimate historical inquiry. He has encouraged scholars to ask different questions, and I mentioned this earlier on. Whose histories are being told? Which archives remain open? Whose voices remain unheard? And these are the questions that us as young historians, we need to be asking all the time and writing about it. So those questions influenced my own doctoral research on sport in political imprisonment on Robben Island. And for many years, historians examined that political imprisonment through political organization, through resistance to education and labor, and sport was largely absent from that conversation until Prof. Odendaal wrote about the sport and other scholars as well. And the question Francois kept asking me, what is sport mattered in this political imprisonment? So that simple question opened up an entirely new field of inquiry for me. So it allowed us to understand that sport is not as a recreation ground within that Robben Island context. So that is what great supervision does. It does not provide answers. It teaches us as students how to better question history. Too often, sport is dismissed as entertainment or leisure, and I think Prof. Reddy also alluded to it early on. Yet sport reveals how societies negotiate race, class, gender, citizenship, nationalism, and power. Sport reflects our highest aspirations and our deepest inequalities as a South African nation. To study sport is therefore to study society itself. This latest publication, Cricket and Society, continues that intellectual tradition. It challenges us as readers to think beyond the boundary rope, and again, the cricket analogy, pardon, and to understand cricket as a cultural, political, and historical phenomenon. In doing so, it contributes not only to cricket scholarship, but also to South African social history. As one of Francois' former doctoral students, I say that Francois has left an indelible mark on my own academic history. His mentorship has taught me that rigorous scholarship requires intellectual honesty, careful evidence, critical reflection, and above all, the courage to investigate histories that have overlooked or refused to acknowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor and immense pleasure to be here today and to introduce my doctoral supervisor, my mentor, my colleague, distinguished sport historian and author of Cricket and Society, Professor Francois Johannes Cleophas. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Professor Cleophas, I can't add to that.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to downscale my presentation a bit because I'm very conscious of time. I just want to acknowledge one more person before I get started, Professor. Okay. So this book started around about 2009. I know Professor Brian O'Connell's daughter said that she would have been here today. I think the narrative went, Professor Brian O'Connell asked Mr. Winston Cleophas, who's sitting at the back there, if he knows somebody who can do a history of St. Augustine's. And Mr. Cleophas told Brian O'Connell, and Brian O'Connell contacted me. And that's how this book came 17 years later. So, hi? Must I press? Where must I press? Hi? Oh, Vanessa, will you press for me? Thank you. So, I'm going to downscale this talk a bit. This is a presentation I'm planning for the British Society of Sports History later on. So I'll bring it down a bit, but basically what the story unfolded after some time was that this is a history of ordinary people trying to play sport normally in an abnormal society. And that was the words penned by Professor Tony Collins. It's not mine. And that dictum, no normal sport in an abnormal society, is a theme that runs throughout the book. Next one. So I asked Ms. Zoe Small just to come and read to us, please, what Mr. Johnny Jacobs said. What is St. Augustine Club in this story?
Good morning. The way the St. Augustine Cricket Club was started, according to my knowledge, it was started to provide the idle youth with an opportunity to play competitive, to play structured sport, to keep them off the road and to keep them away from whatever vices existed at the time. That is still very much part of the St. Augustine culture, the St. Augustine legacy. Something that we are very proud of, and hence the reason why we go into townships around us, to get cricketers. We've got cricketers coming from all over the Cape Flats, Retreat, Steenberg, Lavender Hill, Coniston Park, Alphindale, and then Grassy Park, all over. Lotus River. We've got cricketers from Mitchell's Plain, all over. Yes, we still have programs. We have youth programs. We've got quite a strong youth cricket program, whereby we have teams from under 8 to under 19 years. We're still very much interested in our youth cricket and providing them with a home, with a base whereby they can sort of grow and develop in a family environment. Keep them off their streets, get the families, and get their mothers and fathers involved too.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. So, why is the history of St. Augustine's Cricket Club important? The club was constituted in 1899. I say constituted, they were already playing by 1897. But they were constituted in 1899. In the 20th century, they were dispersed all over the Cape Flats. There are many people that don't understand the effects of what the forced removals had on people. One of the quotes in the book spoke about when a white news reporter was talking about the forced removals of people to a white group of people. They burst out laughing. So the club was then dispersed during the 20th century, leaving them with issues which has not been resolved today, and they probably never will. But for 125 years, the club was sustained through families, volunteers, and of club histories. And the club has got a unique history that, as far as I know, I might be wrong, but as far as I know, it's the only club in the world that has 4 international players that had a global impact, and you see them on that painting there. That was purchased by Dennis Nick for 40,000 Rand. There's one player missing there, Krom Hendricks, and his book is on the table there. So St. Augustine is a local club. They're situated around the corner here. I didn't even know that. I only got to know that when I started to work with them. But it's a local club that moved around Cape Town from the Hamilton's ground where they played to Turfall to the current facility that they have. And it's a club also with an international history. So the St. Augustine's Club talks about 2 things to us. First of all, when the club started, motives that Johnny Jacobs spoke, it was to reinforce imperial power. We cannot operate today in the 21st century also but just complaining. We have to operate within the system also. So they promoted power. They were responsible also for promoting those distinctions between Muslims, Christians. When they played in the City League, people were kept out, but that was the times. At the other hand, they were also a community resource. They gave belonging to people. People could be proud to be members of St. Augustine. It provided people with technical skill. Your club secretaries were usually people that had JC. And it also offered a resistance to people. St. Augustine Club was the voice of the Western Province Cricket Board in the old SAST. Next one. So how did I construct this history? Sean, who's sitting there, Christensen. Do you just want to show us that bag, please? That bag there, show us that bag. He came to my house one day with that bag. I don't know if you can still remember that bag. That bag gives a history of the club from 1986 about till 2002. So I also use newspapers, the National Library. I asked people from the National Library and the archives to be here today. Unfortunately, they can't. Oral histories played a very important part, as Chris mentioned in his introduction. The forced removals made that people lost things. They lost their minute books. They lost their histories. So I've got a list of the interviewers in the book. There's about 70 of them. And then the archives played a very important part in reconstructing this history. So this is a bit of an academic exercise, and I won't go long into this. But I just want to maybe talk about the first point there, that what the book tried to do, it was to center stage marginalized voices. We all know about C.L.R. James now, and we know about the famous cricketers, Greggs and so forth. But nobody talks about the third division player who was forcibly removed from his house and is now living in a flat somewhere, Bonteheuwel, who must find ways to come and play. And that is the crux of the matter, that the international account is equally as important as the local person living in a flat in Lavender Hill or somewhere else playing. We can go on to the next one. So, unfortunately, we can't see the pictures on there now. St. Augustine's really started from the St. Paul's Church. When Reverend Lavis, who later became Bishop Lavis, after which township Bishop Lavis is named, and remains a close connection between Bishop Lavis and St. Augustine's until today, or until now. What the bishop done, or he wasn't a bishop then yet, but he installed certain values in the club, which was still there in 2009, was to install values of dress and public conduct. Hassan Hauer was known for throwing people out of the Western Province Board meetings if they don't come to the meeting in a tie. But that kind of thing comes from the 19th century, when these English missionaries came here with this notion of respect for people who's in authority. There's an account also in the book when the Western Province Cricket Board meeting was held at St. Augustine, and somebody dared question Hauer on something. Somebody from Saint Augustine, Howard got up and chased a person in his car onto the field where there was a match being played at the time. So the club got started out with this notion of respect for authority, moral discipline, and it allowed people a social mobility to a certain extent. The apartheid policies of the day allowed people of color only to go so far. So I'm almost done, eh? So the book then talks about the families. For many years, St. Augustine Club was sustained by families. So those are a few of the families that I have. There wasn't enough space for me to talk about all the families. Brachis and the Oliveras they are family. St. Augustine the book also talks about different kinds of sport. Basil de Oliveira was also captain of the soccer team, aerials soccer team. Had he stayed on in the country, he probably would have played professional soccer. And there's also a minor account of table tennis being played. Basil's father was also a pigeon lover. The history of church also becomes very important. Most sports that we have, most sport clubs grew out of mosques and out of churches. And the St. Paul's Church is a very important part in the history of St. Augustine's. And then lastly, the book also talks about volunteers. To develop sport, you need to have volunteers. And Wakefield very often spoke about the hops that they used to have by Basil's brother-in-law, whose name is just slipped my mind now. Yeah, so unfortunately we can't see those pictures there, but the book also talks about, Beresford spoke about it a few times, the streets of play, which became test matches to them. Johnny Jacobs, who's here, spoke about William Krill, who identified him the first time by watching him play a test match in Lansdowne. The story of St. Augustine's, of course, can't be told without Basil de Oliveira. The colored player who made the 1991 team, Umar, he's in that picture there somewhere. I don't know where. I spoke to his wife a few days ago. I asked if he would be here, so she said, no, we can't. But William Krill told me over and over, there's so many great names in St. Augustine. Everybody wanted to beat him, so everybody spoke bad about St. Augustine. But St. Augustine was the leading club in the former Western Province Cricket Board. And those names there is only a few of the better known names, but there are many, many more. Next one. So, just to finish off, Basil de Oliveira's name, of course, cannot be dismissed. He started playing in Cape Town. He left St. Augustine's for a while. He had a fallout with St. Augustine's because there was an issue with a player called Ben Malamba. I don't know if the people know him. And he fought with him. And Ben Malamba eventually became part of the first South African black team that toured. But be that as it may, from Cape Town, Basil went to Britain. There's quite a few articles on there now. People got funds for him to go. Henderson, that I interviewed from the baseball, told me he wasn't very impressed with Basil because Basil complained that the baseball didn't do enough for him. The point I'm trying to make is no individual is all good or all bad. Basil is definitely one like that. We know that Basil was highly critical against SAST. So although Basil in 1968, his affair was the cause of South Africa sport being expelled, Basil was also of a different character. One of the interviews from Bishop Havers that I interviewed said they weren't very impressed. But that is what sport is about. Some people like you and some people don't. Basil also therefore has a global history. He was knighted in 1973, I think. 74, he became Sir. So Basil has left a legacy for us, for the local club here, Sainto, also for a national consciousness for us. So I want to state, and I'm almost done now, that cricket organization before 1991 was a political affair. Any field of study, medicine, education, sport, churches, religion, is political. Nothing escapes that. So in 1947, SACPOC was formed and St. Augustine was there. In the 1960s, international pressure against sport took off, largely due to the effect of the Basil de Oliveira affair. I don't think there's anybody here who doesn't know what the Basil de Oliveira affair was. In the 1970s was the period of SACOS and the big split in 1976 between the cricket board and the SACPOC, and Frank Bragi, a St. Augustine player, took some St. Augustine's players to play on the multinational side. So St. Augustine's was involved there also. And in the 1990s, I see Sean here. Sean's name comes up quite a few times with the NSC debates. Sean and Beresford. The 1990s was a period of the National Sport Congress, SACOS fight, and SACOS was in the middle of that. SACOS was the last club to go over into the new unified sport. Next one. So I'm not going to read all of that, but after 1990, unification occurred, and that unification had to be done to ensure the 1991 India tour. And that was a formal thing. So by 1991, there was one national structure. But in 2026, we still have unresolved issues. And the Remembering SACOS Committee looked at that, and I hope that those issues will be resolved at some time. Next one. So, again, I don't want to read through all of that. That is what I will be talking about at the British Society for Sports History. But just what I would like to argument is that the book touches on number 4, where the unification of cricket in 1990, which I believe has not been resolved as yet. Dylan will probably talk about it. Dylan couldn't complete a established sporting life. He had to go to Weinberg High. So those issues are picked up in the book. It will make some people uncomfortable, I think. Next one. So finally then, what St. Augustine tells us, cricket is more than a club, it's more than a game. It shows us how sport is shaped by societies and the communities reshape sport. Thank you. And I just want to thank the Dean of the Education Faculty and the Vice Dean for taking time out to coming here today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Was Dylan?
Thank you, Prof. Reddy. Can you give yourselves a round of applause for being here, first of all? Thank you so much. Wonderful. And then, I know associate professor is the academic term, but I call him Prof all the time. Prof. Francois Cleophas, congratulations, man. Can you just give him a round of applause on this amazing milestone? So why am I here? Why am I talking at a book launch that has to do with South African history? My name is Dylan Oliver. I am a comedian. I'm born and bred in Retreat, and I grew up at St. Augustine's Cricket Club. It's the only cricket club that I played for. I joined at the age of 9 in 1998. We lived in Ardley Park, which is just off 11th Avenue, so it was the closest cricket club to us. We could walk over Galaland, and that's when we joined. My initial junior coaches was Mr. Van Dyke and the late Mr. Van Dyke at least, and Mr. Alistair Daniels. And then at the time, the chairman was Mr. Beresford Williams. Sean was involved in management capacity. Mr. John Jacobs is over here. Many familiar faces. Robin Pochonpoel, Sean Roberts, Docky, Dudley over there, Mr. late Clive Colby's brother. And the club changed my life. And I'm a comedian, but I always speak about how cricket changed my life. And when Prof asked me to speak, he said, please speak about the book. I said, okay, I'll have a read. And Cricket and Cape Society, I said, what do you want me to read? He said, read chapter 4. And chapter 4 is about post-unification. And I thought, Yen, you're letting me speak at the academic event. This is big. I have to make sense. I can't make jokes over here. But when going through the chapter, many emotions arose because St. Augustine's Cricket Club is a very special club. I don't usually take notes when I speak, but I had to take notes over here because of all the names that were mentioned in the post-unification chapter. It was very emotional because these were names that we heard as youngsters in the change room. These are names we heard as seniors in the change room of the giants whose shoulders we stood on as St. Augustine's Cricket Club members. Initially, these were the names that I read. The late Clive Colby. Mr. Colby used to come watch every first team game. And even if we won or we lost, after our management shouted at us, Mr. Colby would come shout at us because he loved this club to the moon and back. The late Paul Saville, the late Willie Creel, the late Lenny Walsh, the late Marshall September. If you are Saints of Our Soil, you know all these amazing names. So can we just give them a round of applause with all the other late members of the club that have contributed to our history. I think, Robbie, if I'm right, you must just correct me. One of our favorite jokes about the late Lenny Walsh is when he used to watch cricket at the club, I'd fall asleep with a cigarette in his mouth. Is that correct? Yeah? Was that Mr. Walsh? Mr. Saville, there we go. Mr. Saville would nap on the stoop. Is that right, Beresford? And there was no shade cloth. And then the more that cigarette stayed in his mouth, the more he napped. And when he woke up, still pulled a scaife. What a man. What a man. At the time when I joined, and Saints is very special. A lot of people don't know this. With more than 100 years of history, it's built on principles of family and of love. And Prof went through a couple of the names of the families and surnames and mentioned Frank Brachi, the late Frank Brachi, that is also now Chairman Bradley Johnson. His son's playing, Brent Johnson. You also have Willie Creel, his name was mentioned. Bevan Creel, Lander Creel, Robin and Jesse, Mr. Jacobs, you have the Jacobs brothers, Nathan and Evan. Jerry Miller's name was mentioned over here. I had the privilege of playing with his sons, Dane and Jody. Robin's over here, Poch and Paul. I'll tell you why I'm mentioning him as well, because it's a beautiful photo with him and the late Basil de Oliveira. The Orenzes, Harold and Henry, that was my exposure as youngsters. Mr. Wakefield, they mentioned that you years. Where's Mr. Wakefield? Where's Mr. Wakefield? Mr. Wakefield, you're right. You're right, Mr. Wakefield. He don't want to talk to me at all. I think I still owe him money from the tuck shop from 2001. But the names of the people I'm mentioning over here, this was my exposure as a young cricketer at St. Augustine's and as a senior cricketer. The Darmans, Mr. George Darman and Warren Darman, and his son and his daughter and the family that's now involved. Sean Roberts, as I mentioned earlier, his son Matthew's now playing. Kevin Abrams is over there. His son Keegan is now playing. Docky's over there. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because this is what St. Augustine's is about. If you want to know about the club, it's all about legacy. I don't have any kids yet, but I can tell you now that my kids will play at St. Augustine's. My wife and I always speak about this. And this is a beautiful thing with Saints. Regardless of where you are in the world, you are a Saints boy for life and a Saints girl for life. We speak about legacy. There's a beautiful photo that Prof sent me, and it warmed my heart. It was in 1999. I had the pleasure of meeting the late Basil de Oliveira. But bigger picture, he came down to St. Augustine's on a few occasions, but on this occasion, I remember it was a training session that we were having. I was still a junior. I was probably, maybe 10, 11, and then thereafter, I think he visited again. I'm not sure, but there's a photo, and the photo should be in the book. I'm not too sure. But in that photo, these are the generation of players I played with. Wesley Yulee, wicketkeeper batter. Antonio Mullins, speedster, over 140. Both of them could take any attack apart, bat and ball any day. Sean David's over there. We love Sean David's. Always tried to hit sixes against the wind, but got caught it long on. Every time Mr. Jacob said, don't hit to the flay, but he hit to the flay. In that picture, who else do we have that I can remember over here? There's the late Lenny Walsh, Paul Saville, Robin, you in that photo, Mr. John Jacobs, Sean was still playing. Sean, were you in your early 20s over there, 1999? You were still playing. And then Evan Jacobs is in that photo as well. Good to see Evan over there. But bigger picture, what this brings up is a lot of amazing memories. And for this reason, my heart is so full that this book is written, because as youngsters, you always hear about the giants of the sport that have laid the foundation for us, but there's no document to refer to. Like Prof said, when forced removals happened, when our country's history occurred pre-94, the history books were written maybe from top down, and in that case, it's never the ones who suffered. So in this case, it's speaking about the individual who played at international level, but also the individual that was in the Cape Flats. It was forcefully removed. It was in the second, third, and fourth team, but making it human, giving the humanity to it, not just celebrating the shiny things of that specific era. Names that were also mentioned in the post-unification were Alison Johnson, coaching director, Craig Murray. For those of you who don't know Craig, now retired, but at one stage a prolific TV, radio, and journalist in the cricketing space. Also played professional cricket at the time. And then they speak about the international tours, and my heart was so full when this was mentioned, because as kids who come from Retreat, that's where I'm from, Steenberg, Lavendale, Grassy Park, Alphendale, Lotus River, Mitchells Plain, Strandfontein, that was the feeder areas to the clubs. We don't know how to dream, because the dream is not in front of us. We can only dream if we have teachers or if we have coaches that allow us to dream. And teachers and coaches who create spaces and opportunities for us to see things that aren't in our immediate environment. And I remember when I was under 13 junior, the then under 19s went on tour to England. Mr. Jacobs, I think you were part of that touring party, if I'm not mistaken. I know Dane or Jody, Dane Miller went, Hayden Collar. These are all players who played for the club. and they were being interviewed on SABC. If you were on national TV in the 90s, it was a big thing. There was no social media. So this was the pinnacle. And for me, seeing that on TV, I was like, yo, my brother's going overseas to go play cricket. What a beautiful thought. What a beautiful dream. All because of people within the St. Augustine's family that wanted these kids to dream. Similarly, always hear about the amazing overseas tours with the seniors. They went on tour to Denmark, and I think that was in the early 2000s. Again, not even 10 years after democracy. So to have this many players and players of color going overseas to play for the country, at the time, Paul Adams, the shining star of the club, what a beautiful story. If you chat to Paul, the story doesn't make sense. Within 2 years, he's playing international cricket, setting the world on fire. There's a book, I think it's called A Season of Glory. I think that documents Paul's rise to stardom. I think he was ahead of the curve, and I'll stand on it. I know he was ahead of the curve. The world wasn't ready for Paul Adams. The world wasn't ready for his action. The world wasn't ready for how he took them by storm. So if you look at that legacy that Paul left, he's part of the club. Look at this. We have a saint of our soil, Paul Adams, another saint of our soil, Basil de Oliveira, and Tata Madiba in one photo. This is historic. Can we just clap for this? This picture alone, it's global recognition. And aside from it being global recognition, people know the message and the history that comes with it. In the post-unification book, I wasn't aware that I was written about in the book, so I laughed when I read it. It was very funny, but it's all factual. Professor speaks about the School of Excellence, 2000-2001. What a beautiful brainchild. Mr. Jacobs, you remember? Perisford, Sean? Yeah, Robbie. They were all seniors at the time, involved in different management spaces. But the School of Excellence, it allowed us to dream as youngsters who weren't at schools with access, who weren't at affluent schools. I attended St. Anthony's Primary. That's the school that I grew up at in Heathfield. Then I attended SP. I was actually here when the school hall was built. South Peninsula is very dear to my heart. Miss Myberg, current principal, one of my former teachers, Mr. Baker, one of my former teachers, former principal. Dudley's also here. Dudley's a former SP student. Robbie, you, SP student. SP is very close to my family's heart. Both of my sisters attended the school. My dad was governing body chairman for 2 terms, I think 8 years. There's actually a photo of him over there. Very difficult with the photo of your daddy being there while you're failing an exam in the hall. He's looking at you going, brother, you should have studied. What's your story? But I remember, and SP and St. Augustine's has similar stories in terms of struggle and access. I remember Mr. Isaacs' principal at the time, one of the heroes, always pushing for, we don't need to go to schools with access, whether it's private schools or Model C schools. We'll build the environment over here. And the school was built in 2002 or 3, Mr. Baker? Was it finished? Or 4? 2006. And I remember the school, this was 2 netball courts. And I remember, I think Helen Ziller was mayor at the time, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember my dad always speaking to me about the meetings. He could never give me information, but always going, there's positive things that's coming. And then the tuck shop was over there, and we were having break, and they were marking out where the school was going to be. Because that was the one big thing. We still had prefab units over here. Again, all the teachers fought for that. Now it's cement classrooms. It's a big thing. I know it sounds funny, but it's a big thing. This is a lot of the accesses here is what previous generations fought for, similar to what happens at Saints. And I remember them marking out the school hall and going, yo, it's a school, it's a small home, and is Mr. Lotterlight, is it SP? There's 1,000 kids. Then they eventually built it, and we looked at it, and you go, yo, this is normal to a lot of schools who have access, but for a school like this to make sure that kids have a roof over their head, have a multi-purpose center where they can write exams or play sports. So just thank you to Mr. Baker, Ms. Myberg, and all the other teachers and principals before you, Mr. Isaacs, etc., for creating spaces for us and allowing us to dream similar to St. Augustine's. We can clap for that. Thank you very much. There we go. So the reason I mentioned St. Anthony's and the reason I mentioned South Peninsula High is because I never matriculated at SP. I left SP in March, grade 11. A lot of people think I left SP in grade 9. I left SP in March, grade 11. And the chapter goes as such. This is from Mr. John Jacobs. Dalen, all of his parents came to me. I was his coach at the time. They came to say that Dalen has got an opportunity, a scholarship from Wynberg Boys, and it means that Wynberg will have his first choice on his availability to play for them. They then wanted to know how I felt about it. My major concern is this is good for the youngsters' development and not just on a sporting level, but also academically. I said yes. My answer would be yes. So I say yes, we nurtured him as a cricketer, and I can tell you quite categorically, if Dalen did not attend Wynberg Boys, he would not have captained the Western Province team. Well, okay, maybe there's a remote possibility, but I doubt whether he would have captained the Western Province under 17 and Western Province under 19 teams if he had played for St. Augustine's. Now, bigger picture, I've always been proud of playing for Saints because it's the only cricket club I've played for. When I went to Wynberg Boys, I went back a year because I attended school early. At 17, Mr. Baker, my mommy was always thinking of ways for me to stay another year behind. Then when I got the opportunity to change schools, I remember having a conversation with Mr. Isaacs and my parents and giving the school's history with the family and the club's history. There was a moment like this when we were quiet and Mr. Isaacs was like, but SP is a good school. And I said, we never said it's never a good school. The main thing was access to a world that I never knew. And I remember going to Wynberg Boys and going, Yenna, is this a school? It's a campus of schools, so many sports fields, so many nets. And then going there and going, okay, cool, there's also other kids of color here. There's also other kids that sound like me. There's kids from the Cape Flats. There's kids from the township. And then bigger picture. I always tell my parents, that was the best decision you could have made for me at the time. Not to do with academia, but just to do with access. And we live in a country where if you don't have access, your heart breaks because you can't dream. But I was given that opportunity, and within 2 weeks, that decision was made. And I saw a world of cricket and sport and access that I could only have dreamt of, that I never knew of. But my heart was full because of the roots that Saints gave me, because of the foundation that Saints gave me. I played there every school holiday, and I matriculated and then went back to the club. I was fortunate enough to captain the club. At first team level, I captained us to the Premier League, to the 1A. I also captained us to relegation, back to the 1B, so I'm very proud of it. And I captained us back up, so I'm all about consistency, even though it's a yo-yo. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because all of us sitting in the room here, especially with our history with the club, we've gotten opportunities, whether it's in school, whether it's at university, whether it's in academia. But we mustn't forget our roots in the story. We must always speak proudly about where we're from, whether it's from a St. Augustine's, whether it's from a South Peninsula High. And the reason I mentioned this, we got the late Basil de Oliveira. What a man, what a legacy. And we got to experience that legacy. I remember there was an invitational game that was played in the late 2000s. And his late son, Damien de Oliveira, came down. And we got to meet the son who was coach at Worcestershire, Damien de Oliveira. There was a youngster running around. His name was Brett de Oliveira. We didn't know who Brett was at the time, but Brett was Damien's son. He's the grandson of the late Basil de Oliveira. And then we were fortunate enough for Brett to be part of our first team when Brett came from England, from Worcester, from his county side to play as our club pro, and he spent the season here. What a beautiful moment. 3 legacies of the Oliveiras played at St. Augustine's. Even though Damien didn't play, that invitation game, he coached that team. So technically, by South African law, whether or not we like to agree, he was a coach and a player at St. Augustine's. Not historically, but factually via social media on our auntie's WhatsApp group, okay? So that was a beautiful moment for the club. Another connection and a beautiful moment that we had as players during post-unification era was playing with Moeen Ali, one of the heroes of the game, one of the legends in the English cricket space. And he spent 2 seasons at St. Augustine's through a Basil de Oliveira connection because he was playing at Worcestershire and Damien was his coach. I remember Beresford was chairman at the time, and Mo came as a youngster fresh out of the England under-19 side and played. And then when he just got a Lions call-up, he came back. And again, we were privy to having that experience. One of the best partnerships I saw with Mo was with Sean Roberts against Police, a wonderful Police side, many provincial players. They chased 250 in about 25 overs, if I'm not mistaken. 6s over the clubhouse, 6s over the flats, 6s over the chalet at the club. And you were going, what a beautiful day. There wasn't even betting involved. We should have betted, guys. But bigger picture with St. Augustine's legacy, as I'm going down the list from Gogi to Madiba to Dolly to Jason to Moeen Ali, another generation now. This is post-unification. Jason Smith, a Protea. He went to the T20 World Cup. He plays for Dolphins in Durban. He played for the Cobras. He's also involved with my Cape Town, but he's a son of saints, attended Wynberg Boys. He's from Alphendale, around the corner. And then after school, he came to St. Augustine's. We had the pleasure of playing with him in that time when we were promoted to the Premier League. He also played with us when we were relegated. So even though he's a Protea, he played in the second division. That's important. He never forgets his roots. But bigger picture, the legacy of St. Augustine's continues. We've got a youngster sitting at the back over there, Gemma Porter. Gemma was a young mini cricketer that was running around in the late 2000s. Her dad's here. Mom always extremely supportive. Gemma had more energy than all of the boys. I was coaching mini cricket at the time. Lander was the junior chair. Peterswood was the senior chair. And we always spoke about how amazing Gemma was. And you know, when a youngster starts playing, you don't know what's going to happen. But fast forward 15 years later, Gemma's had the privilege of representing South Africa at the Under-19 Women's World Cup. Yep, there she is. And she's currently playing for the Western Province senior women's side. So keep flying the flag, Gemma. We can't wait to see you make your debut for the Proteas women's side. You are an inspiration and a saint of our soil. Congratulations on everything. So the reason I'm mentioning all of this, I'm just going through my notes so that I don't forget anything. I want to say thank you to Associate Professor Francois Cleophas for documenting our club's history. You're not only documenting our club's history, you're documenting a history of pre-94 that has inspired us. I see there's a chapter on Hassan Hauer. These are names that we hear all the time. These are stories we hear about all the time. And the way club cricket and sports is going in general, the youngsters don't want to hear about history. They don't want to sit and have a beverage afterwards with the other opposition and chat about the history of a club. If you look at all the clubs in Cape Town, everyone has a special history. But the fact that you documented this, and when I have children one day, I can speak to them about the club that I'm still a member at. Similarly, with a lot of the people over here, even if they're not part of the St. Augustine's family, they can speak about the club that has stood for more than 100 years, even though majority of the members still don't pay subs. So thank you so much for the amazing opportunity and allowing me to speak. Thank you, Professor Cleophas. Thank you. Prof. Reddy, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dylan, for that. What's his name? Dylan. Okay. Entertaining, honest, informative, 30 words per minute count. It's very useful. Thank you very much. Okay. Is our next speaker online or is he present? Okay. Is he patched in? Where's our technician? Is he? Okay. So I'm going to hand you over to Advocate Norman Arendse, a member of the club, of the cricket fraternity, to make his input. Over to you.
I'm good. Thank you, MC, and greetings and good morning to Francois and all the distinguished guests and colleagues and comrades who are present in the audience. I couldn't quite see, but I hear Sean Christensen's name and others who I'm quite familiar with, perhaps too familiar. And thank you, Francois, for inviting me to this important occasion to speak as a former member of the club, the oldest club in the country, and I would think probably the most well-known cricket club in the country, if only because of its association with the great Basil de Oliveira, and of course in more recent times, Paul Adams. To that extent, the St. Augustine's Cricket Club has quite a remarkable history in terms of producing national players, of course, as Dwayne said, more recently, Jason Smith. And also on the administration side, St. Augustine's administrators have administered at the highest level in the game. Sean and Beresford Williams ascending to important positions at the Western Province Cricket Association, and Beresford and myself also having served as president and presiding over Cricket South Africa. I think it's perhaps something that Francois should look at in maybe further editions of this book. Because I'm sure Sean and Beresford and Johnny Jacobs and others who've administered the club will tell you that we would not have been able to achieve this and do all these things if it hadn't been for the Savills, the Creels, the Arenzes, the Walshes, the Jacobs, the Colbys, who have served this club. I'm not sure whether Armin White is also in the audience, but also as secretary to the club. I've made some notes, so I am not losing my focus, but if I read from some of my notes, please bear with me. Just by way of introduction, there are three kinds of cricket books. There's the autobiographical book written by, if I may, just because I'm using it as an example, mention Steve Waugh, Shane Warne, and some of the Mike Brearley and some of the cricketers that we've read about and heard about and may have been privileged to see in action. They write books about their lives, and that catalogues their personal lives and their interaction with other players and their own communities. Then you have books by cricket writers, writers who specialize in writing cricket books and who have followed the game for years, and on which we rely as cricket lovers and administrators. And then we have the third category of writer who are those who write about the historical, political, and societal aspects of the game and how cricket impacts our daily lives. And of course, I think Francois has already mentioned some of these names, Mahendra Guha and C.L.R. James, who wrote so beautifully and so prosaically about cricket. And perhaps Francois would like to fall into this category with his book. Thank you for inviting me to speak. And on this special occasion, at what is a special venue, South Peninsula, which has also played its role in our non-racial sporting history and in our struggle for equality in education. South Peninsula itself produced, like with Francois and his achievements, many sporting icons who were cruelly denied the right to represent the country of their birth. It is perhaps appropriate, therefore, that the launch takes place today at this venue. Today is a special day where we celebrate the launch of an important work that records and catalogues the history of the oldest club in the country, and the most well-known, as I said, because of its association with Basil d'Oliveira. But of course, the St. Augustine's Cricket Club is much more than a cricket club associated with Basil d'Oliveira. It was the center of our Cape society, representing its many facets of cricket, of course, religion, politics, and its values. The history of St. Augustine's is, in fact, the history of our society, in particular here in the greater Cape Town area. Sports, and I refer to cricket, football, rugby, hockey, baseball, softball, and other codes, played an integral role in our society, which during the years of apartheid was a very closed and closeted society with its own prejudices, which is catalogued in part by Francois in his book, especially the Christian Muslim differences in our game, which was fueled by apartheid, which was based on race and spatial segregation due to the Black Land Act of 1913 and later the Group Areas Act. On a personal note, I was born in South Road in Wynberg, but because I was born and we lived on the Plumstead side of the road, we were forced removed in 1968, and I ended up in a place called Belthorn Estate. This book and our sporting history catalogues the politics in our sport. The club itself, like many of our clubs in all other codes, especially football and cricket and rugby, was in fact the educational cradle of our political consciousness. At a time when we did not enjoy the political rights that we now take for granted, that is in our constitution. I'm sure that some of you in the audience would identify with me when I say that we often came home to our parents and expressed some views that they were horrified about, and where they would say that you're going to get into trouble with the police, security police, if you hold these views. So perhaps it's best that you don't talk about it domestically. But it's because we would have gone to a cricket meeting, a soccer meeting. Some of us would have started off as recording secretaries of the club, chairperson of the club. And that is where our political consciousness grew. So our clubs provided a voice to the voiceless, And that is where our discussions took place. So it's not surprising that in the introduction, when Francois was introduced, and 1 year of his many activities across many codes, and that is important because unlike, I think, in recent years, for many reasons which we won't discuss today, we played sport throughout the year. You either played cricket in summer, or football, or hockey, or baseball, or rugby, some of the better known, well established codes. So throughout the year, you were engaged within your club, and within your club, the same or similar conversations took place. Why can't we play against the whites? Why can't we represent this country? What can we do to address the situation? And that is where many of these debates are recorded faithfully in the book, and in the many references to the minutes of meetings that Francois so painstakingly has recorded in his book. Of course, what in later years epitomized our struggle was the slogan, for want of a better word, no normal sport in an abnormal society. And if many of the hardliners within SACOS, Frank van der Horst himself, had their way, then we would not have become involved in so-called normal sport so shortly after our political liberation, because most of our people and most of us are still not economically liberated, and of course now epitomized by the very disgraceful xenophobic attacks against our fellow Africans from other African countries, because that hasn't happened yet. And of course, most of you will know that we still remain the most unequal society in the world. So this wasn't just a slogan, it's something we lived by. We still have so much inequality in our game. There are no better persons than Johnny, Sean, and Beres, and Armin. I'm sure I'm missing out some, Bradley and some other, and Robin Pochenpoel and others who can identify with the continued struggle that we have with our cricket clubs. The facilities are still sorely lacking. We still fight on a daily basis with the city council, DA-controlled city council. For many years, and I think still today, we were opposed to what was called a management system, because it was part of the apartheid structure, and many clubs, like for example Avondale, Avoners, where Frank Braggie went, and they played at Field Crescent. Field Crescent was always a nice field to play on because it was kind of run by the management committee. So there are many aspects to this slogan that defined our struggle and caused much controversy in our within our clubs, within our provincial structures, and of course between the likes of Frank van der Horst and Sekos, and what was subsequently um, the National Sports Congress that ultimately caused a split in our in our cricket in particular. This slogan, perhaps Francois, you should take on this project, which has been written about by people like Prof. Andre Odendaal and Mo Ali and Ashwin Desai, played an absolutely critical role in the liberation of our country. Arguably, I'm not sure if Andre is in the audience, but I think it was I may have missed the start of the gathering. Arguably, had sport, I'm talking about our side of the sport, not joined and aligned with the struggle for political liberation, we would not have been liberated today. And the reason for that is almost entirely because of the central role that sport played within the apartheid society. And that is why today people debate and ask, Rassie Erasmus has done amazing things in our rugby. Why can't football and our cricket be like the rugby? And the answer stares me in the face, and hopefully it will also stare you in the face. It's because of rugby's association within association with other countries like New Zealand, and Australia and other countries where they played international rugby even into the late 1980s. I think New Zealand Cavaliers, or they came to tour here under that name, still toured here in 1988. And of course, there's the privileges enjoyed by rugby at some of the best private and Model C schools. And yes, youngsters like the Colbys and the Willemses and the Kirtley Aronses and others, they've been snatched from their own schools in their communities because of their talent, and they can be taken to these other elite schools to own or further own their skills. We don't have that privilege, or we haven't had that in cricket. Um, to the extent that rugby has. And so just a throwaway comment, unless our football can get to a point where youngsters are not only encouraged, but to play football in an organized way at these private and elite schools, it's going to take many, many years for South African football and our national team to reach the kind of levels that our rugby has. But I mention this not as an aside, but this would have been the kind of debates that we had at St. Augustine's and some of the other cricket clubs. We, as a cricket club, St. Augustine's, like other cricket clubs here, especially in the Western Province, was caught in this debate between with Hasanawa that has been catalogued. I think we need to acknowledge the role that Hasanawa played, despite being a controversial and even dictatorial figure, as described in the book. But he played a critical role in our lives, and we need to acknowledge him for that. And this split with Eisenhower, as Francois recorded, manifested within the St. Augustine's Cricket Club. And I think Paul Saville speaks about the split and even becoming involved with Hassan. I see I need to wrap up. So in my job, I have to make notes so that I speak sense when I represent a client. The book contains much data, an analysis of the great players, Whitten, Rodrigues, Lenny Walsh, Colby, February, Wakefield, Mahoney, Marshall, September, Jerry Miller, who I was very, very privileged to play with and against for many, many years. Great player, absolutely denied national recognition, would have walked into any Proteas team. Paul Adams, that late youngster Viljoen, I think he died recently, tragically, was a great opening batsman. Sean, of course, Beres, Dion Kemp, Randall Kibero, and more recently, Jason Smith. The book itself for me was quite an emotional experience. It took me on a roller coaster ride, especially having been involved with the club and having played with and against many of the great players that are mentioned in the book. The book is very important and records the role in the transformation of cricket and sport to where we are today. So thank you very much for inviting me. I hope I haven't detained you for too long. And Francois, I wish you very well and all the best going forward. Thank you very much.
Perspective on the book and the whole involvement in struggle for better sport and better living in the country. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to call on my colleague, Professor Leslie Lagrange, to make an input right now.
Good morning, everyone. All protocol observed. So I want to preface my talk with just a few comments. To say that I'm not going to do a review of Francois' book, but I'd like to, in a small way, add to the conversation vis-a-vis his book. And also say that I'm going to refer to Basil de Oliveira and Paul Adams, not because I think they were, in the context of St. Augustine Club, that they were more important than any other player, but the way their lives unfold, it's instructive, and that's why I'm going to talk about them. And also say that I'm going to gloss over the detail that Francois spoke about in relation to Basil de Oliveira, also the detail on the South African government side, so I won't talk about the role of Piet Leroux, etc. So I'm going to, so that I don't succumb to long-windedness, I'm going to read my talk. So thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the conversation on cricket and Cape society. Let me begin by congratulating Francois on a sterling achievement with the manuscript Cricket and Cape and Society. This book, which took 17 years to complete, was begun while Francois was still teaching at the very school hosting today's launch, South Peninsula High School. The work stands testimony to his relentless tenacity, insatiable curiosity, and dogged persistence, hallmarks of great scholarship. So well done, Francois. In my own teaching of social and educational research to students and academics across the country, I often begin by speaking about cricket. I explain that, like research, cricket has a history, its own rules, and its own discourse. By discourse, I mean the way language and context come together to produce meaning. For example, in everyday discourse, maiden refers to a young woman, but in cricket it means an over bowled without any runs scored. Similarly, while Chinaman in everyday discourse refers to a man from China, in cricket it denotes a left arm wrist spin delivery. Even the term wicket carries multiple meanings. It can refer to the stumps, the pitch, or dismissal of a batter. I elaborate that just as one must play, spectate, and study cricket to truly understand it, so too must one study, conduct, or critically consume research to grasp its complexities. From there, I introduce post-colonialism, noting that cricket provides a useful lens for understanding it. For instance, the very identity of the West Indies was forged through cricket. It might never have existed without the game. So it is post-colonialism, therefore, that I wish to discuss further. My central thesis is that Cleophas's book engages deeply with post-colonial studies. Post-colonialism begins at the very moment of encounter between colonizer and colonized. Cricket, as the empire's game, was exported by the British in the 18th and 19th centuries as part of imperial expansion. It was introduced under the guise of a civilizing mission, taught to schools, in schools, clubs, and among local elites as a vehicle for instilling so-called British values: fair play, discipline, hierarchy, and patience. Yet embedded within this project was exclusion. In South Africa, India, and the West Indies, for example, early clubs were racially segregated. Whites played in official leagues while others were relegated to dusty fields and borrowed gear. For the sake of time, I wish to highlight two post-colonial concepts: creolization and mimicry, with greater emphasis on mimicry. Creolization refers to the process of intermixing and cultural transformation that produces a Creole society. While often applied to the Caribbean and South America, it can equally describe post-colonial societies whose racially mixed populations are the legacies of European colonization. Braithwaite argued that creolization is not a static product, but an ongoing process incorporating both acculturation and interculturation. The absorption of one culture by another, he suggested, leads to reciprocity and enrichment. Young extended this by describing unconscious hybridity, whose generative force gives rise to new forms of amalgamation rather than mere contestation. It was within such a Creole community that the St. Augustine Cricket Club emerged. There was certainly acculturation, white flannels, teas, clubhouses, committees, annual reports, and the rituals of gentlemanly conduct. Matches were played under MCC laws. English was spoken and even on some occasions played with white opposition. Yet it was never simply acculturation. Contestation was equally present, embodied in the struggle for non-racial sport, captured in the powerful slogan, "No normal sport in an abnormal society," that others refer to as well. So this brings me to mimicry. Mimicry has come to be described as an ambivalent relationship between colonizer and colonized. Ashcroft, Griffiths, and Tiffin note that when colonial discourses encourage the colonized subject to mimic the colonizer by adopting its cultural habits, assumptions, institutions, and values, the result is never a simple reproduction. Rather, mimicry produces slippages and tensions and destabilizes the very authority it seeks to affirm. There are two senses in which mimicry must be understood. The first is the colonizer's desire for the colonized to embody British values, assumptions, and cultural habits, to become almost British, but never fully British. This almost but not quite condition ensures that the colonized remain different in a deficit sense, perpetually subaltern. Homi Bhabha traces this logic in the writings of Lord Macaulay, Kipling, Forster, Orwell, and Naipaul, capturing this in his famous formulation, almost the same but not quite. The second sense of mimicry emerges from the actions of the colonized themselves. Here, mimicry shades into mockery, for it can appear to parody what it mimics. By reproducing colonial forms with subtle difference, the colonized exposed their artificiality, turning mimicry into a mode of resistance. In this way, mimicry is never mere acculturation. It is also contestation, a practice that unsettles colonial authority by revealing its fragility. The second sense of mimicry is vividly evident in cricket. In 1932, India defeated England at Lord's, a symbolic moment that ushered in India's rise as a cricketing superpower. Over time, the center of gravity of the sport shifted eastward. In the 1970s and 1980s, the West Indies dominated world cricket, not by simply replicating English styles, but by introducing a distinctive brand of play known as calypso cricket, combining flamboyant batting and swaggering fast bowling. The dominance was not mimicry in the sense of passive reproduction, but mimicry as parody and transformation, unsettling the colonial hierarchy by excelling in the colonizer's own game while reshaping it. Closer to home at St. Augustine Cricket Club, the trajectory was similar. Emerging from dusty streets, players mimicked English cricket with white flannels, tees, and clubhouses. Yet when denied entry into the whites-only Western Province Cricket Union, they subverted South African cricket by building their own structures, independent, generally with other clubs, independent leagues, newspapers, and stars. The style was distinctly Cape, multilingual, working class, and deeply connected to religious organizations. Here, mimicry became mockery, parody, the exclusivity of colonial cricket while cultivating a vibrant alternative ethos. In this way, mimicry in cricket was never merely acculturation. It was a creative act of resistance and redefined the game's meaning and ownership. The dynamics of mimicry are instructively embodied in the lives of two St. Augustine players who rose to become Test cricketers, Basil de Oliveira and Paul Adams. Their stories matter not simply because they were outstanding individuals within the club's history, but because the way mimicry played out in their careers illuminates the ambivalence of colonial sport. Basil de Oliveira's journey is perhaps the most striking parody of colonial mimicry. Denied opportunities in South Africa, he left its shores to play in England, eventually representing England in 44 tests. If mimicry is almost the same, but not quite, then de Oliveira's career was a mockery in the post-colonial theoretical sense, a parody of exclusion itself. His presence at Worcestershire county cricket brought something different, something indelible. Tony Collins, in the foreword to Cricket and Cape Society, reflects on how de Oliveira's style and ethos left a lasting impression, reshaping English cricket culture from within. He writes, I received my cricket education growing up in Yorkshire in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Beyond the pantheon of Yorkshire greats, my favorite player was Basil de Oliveira. To my 8-year-old self, he was not only a superlative batter, bowler, and fielder, but he also seemed to have an unusual ease of command of the game. It differed completely from the smug superiority of the English middle-class players or the flinty arrogance of the Yorkshiremen. Basil appeared to be impervious to the troughs and furrows of the game, being possessed of a poise and determination that seemed to be assured of his eventual success. I didn't know it then, but as cricket and Cape society amply demonstrates, this confidence was not simply the product of Basil's remarkable talents. His cricketing character had been shaped and formed by the rich experience of St. Augustine Cricket Club, where he and his family had learned not only the art of the game, but also the inner strength to overcome even the biggest obstacles which the apartheid regime imposed upon them. Basil de Oliveira's career reached the most profound post-colonial moment in 1968. Too good a player to be omitted from the England planned tour to South Africa, his selection forced the apartheid state into crisis. Prime Minister B.J. Foster declared that England could not tour if Basil de Oliveira were included. His very presence in the English side compelled Empire to choose between racism and cricket. The tour was cancelled. This was mimicry with political teeth. The colonized subject denied recognition at home, returned through the colonizers' institutions to destabilize them from within. De Oliveira's selection was not simply sporting merit, it was a parody of exclusion itself, exposing the contradictions of colonial authority and forcing the world to confront the incompatibility of apartheid and the values cricket claimed to embody. Fast forward. Post-1994, the inclusion of players of colour in the national side marked a new chapter in South African cricket. Paul Adams was among the first, and his presence was transformative. His bowling style he was endearingly nicknamed Khoha by locals and described internationally as the frog, was unlike anything in the MCC coaching manuals. With its big hop, slingy wrist and ball released almost backwards, Adams' action was a parody of orthodoxy, a mockery of the post-colonial in the post-colonial theoretical sense. Nothing in the colonizers' textbook looked like that, yet it was effective, unsettling, and unforgettable. Adams' career also illustrates what Homi Baba called the mimicry trap. You're allowed in, but you're never fully one of us. Those selected for the Proteas, later on Adams spoke out against the racialized sledging he endured in the dressing room, being called brown or Zimbu. His refusal to remain silent had transformative effects, forcing South African cricket to confront the lingering exclusions and hypocrisies. In this way, Adams embodied mimicry as a parody of and resistance, admitted into the national side, yet never fully accepted. His presence exposed the fractures within post-apartheid sport and catalyzed change. Finally, we turn to Francois. With scholarly trajectory, exemplified mimicry in the academy. On the surface, Francois mimics the Western academe, publishing in peer-reviewed journals, producing scholarly books with outlets such as Routledge, earning subsidy revenue for Stellenbosch University, and engaging in bean-counting exercises that mark institutional life. Yet this mimicry is never mere reproduction. It is a parody and destabilization. For here is Stellenbosch University, once a bastion of apartheid, now producing works on the history of the struggle for non-racial sport during the colonial and apartheid periods. Francois' scholarship unsettles the very foundations of research in his department, faculty, and university. By inscribing in the annals of history those narratives too often silenced, he transforms mimicry into resistance, parody into truth-telling. Well done, Francois. In your work, mimicry becomes more than imitation. It becomes a mode of justice, a way of ensuring that the histories not often told are finally given voice. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I think I omitted to introduce my colleague. That is Professor Leslie Lagrange. He's a distinguished professor of curriculum studies and a well-published scholar at Stellenbosch University, and also a 24/7 listening device for Francois. Okay, colleagues, we've come to the conclusion of the morning. So I just want to, briefly pull together what I gleaned from all the inputs and the discussions. And I want to just use an analogy that a colleague used about mathematics, learning and education. He used this term, it's not on here. Here's the book distributors. Shall I call someone else? Say them again? Yes? Okay. Francois sent me this a few days ago, and I think there's an item missing. Beresford Williams, right? Yeah, Beresford. It is your turn. I hope Francois told you about it. Sorry, it wasn't on. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Distinguished guests, past cricketers, administrators, family, and special friends. This morning I am overwhelmed, but indeed privileged to say a few words at this launch of the book. So I'm not going to stick to my program here, my plan, but I think I need to start by saying to Professor Cleophas, thank you and congratulations on this major milestone and achievement of launching the book. It is indeed a huge, huge achievement. So I want to say to you and the entire team that have contributed to achieving this, well done. We salute you. This morning, I sat and listened to everyone speak and the contributions. What comes to mind, and I thought, let me just do it up front. This morning, seeing so many special people, whether you were a player, administrator, an academic, and that person that have contributed to our struggle for a better society, a better place in this country. And I also want to acknowledge those online this morning. We have people from Australia, England, around the world that's participating in this launch today. I want to say from the heart to you, I salute you, and I want to salute each and every family that have contributed over decades that made it possible that we can advance. Because this morning, this is more than just about a club. It is about so many communities, so many families that have given everything. Some have even sacrificed their life in order for us to make progress in where we want to be, to ensure justice, peace, and a better life for everyone. So I just want to say I salute you all, and thank you so much to your families. Today, it is more than a launch of this publication. We preserve a legacy, And I want to emphasize we celebrate a story that deserves to be told, remembered, and passed on to future generations. St. Augustine's Cricket Club was born at St. Paul's, Bree Street in Cape Town, and I want to acknowledge the Anglican Church on the day 1899, on a Sunday morning, when the sermon was about ideal youth, and that is where the club was born. But I also want to remind us that it is more relevant and more appropriate today that our youth are struggling. There's not many opportunities. They don't have access to our economy. They are not safe spaces. And I just want to encourage everyone this morning that the struggle is real. Our job is not done. It is important that we continue to create opportunities for our youth so that they can build on their future. The club's roots go back to the days of the governors of Cape of Good Hope. Today, the residents of the Premier of the Western Cape. And that is where St. Augustine started playing their cricket. We moved from that venue, we moved to Greenpoint, where Hamilton's plays their rugby. That was the home of St. Augustine's. And through Group Areas Act, we had to go to a number of venues like many other clubs. Bloemhof Flats was the heartbeat, woke up, and we moved from Cape Town to Greenpoint, to St. Francis Home in Thornton, to Turfel, and then in the 70s to Alphindale. The club stood as a beacon of hope and opportunity for excellence. It became more than a sporting institution. It became a place where young people found purpose, where lifelong friendships were forged, and where character was shaped both on and off the field. The home of St. Augustine's was eventually settled here, but I also want to say that the impact and effect of Group Areas Act, I don't think has seriously been addressed in many decades. In fact, facilities around Cape Town has gone backward. Our facilities is not what it needs to be. We don't have that safe spaces, and we have retrogressed. However, this remarkable journey was interrupted by that dark history. The implementation of this Group Areas Act resulted in the removal of families, tearing apart the social fabric that had sustained the clubs and our community. And I'm harping on that point because our work is not done, and I want to encourage everyone. By this book, we've now writing our own history. We are telling our story, because many of these stories of these greats that were denied to play for our country is not recorded, is not reflected. We have some history, but if we're not going to write our history, if we're not going to celebrate our greats, it's not going to be done. So this morning, we're not only a club, but a tradition of resilience, dignity, and service. Administrators, coaches, and volunteers, supporters, and ultimately family played an indispensable role in ensuring that this proud institution continued to flourish. I go back to, if I listen to all the great stories of Bloemhof Flats, I know that great sportsmen and women came from those communities. I didn't even realize the Puzzy Jansen, the footballer, also played for St. Augustine's Cricket Club. At that time, we were just so blessed with so much talent. And today, many of them are not even recognized. So I want to say that we need to keep that fire burning. The book reminds us of an important truth. If we do not write our history, others may write it for us, or worse, it may be forgotten. So just as a word of encouragement, continue to record our histories, and I want to encourage others to do the same, and acknowledge the sacrifices made, and that future generations can understand the shoulders upon which they stand. The dream team, in the 60s and 70s, some of the younger guys this morning, St. Augustine's Cricket Club won almost every trophy that was on offer. And very little is written about that, so I think part 2, as referred to, the next book will have to start sharing that. The history of our club is not just about runs and wickets or trophies. It's about the people. It is the people that keep things alive and keep the club alive. It's a story of perseverance in the face of adversity and of unwavering commitment for excellence. As we celebrate this publication, let us also commit ourselves to preserving the rich history and build on it. May every young cricketer who reads these pages be inspired to dream bigger, serve selflessly, and uphold the values that define the St. Augustine Cricket Club for generations. Finally, to the author, contributors, historians, and everyone who has brought this book to life, we extend our heartfelt congratulations and gratitude. You've given the club a priceless gift, a permanent record of its history. Like I say, the story is one of perseverance, hope, and triumph over adversity. And it remains the inspiration for future generations, proud history, and an enduring legacy for those yet to come. May the St. Augustine's Cricket Club continue to inspire, unite, and enrich our nation for many years to come. Thank you to everyone for your contributions, and we look forward to that continued sustained efforts to build a better society, a better Western Cape, a better country. And let us not forget those that are facing many struggles throughout the world. Let us be on the right side of history. I thank you.
Sorry, just checking. Okay, I was going to tell you about, my inferences and what I've gleaned from the different inputs. Thank you very much, Beresford. It reminded me of what a colleague once, analogy he used for mathematics research and student learning. He said, you get kitchen mathematics and dining room mathematics. Okay? I don't know on which side of that continuum we fall, but anyway, what he said was, in the kitchen, the children reason in messy ways, and when they present their answers, that's the dining room. And I think I want to just map that onto Francois' work with his book. There's so many inputs he received, interviews, club records, minutes, photographs, and all of that. And that's the ingredients he worked with in the kitchen. Right, piecing that all together and working according to research, conventions, that's his recipe. And he put all these things together, and eventually the dinner emerged. So the messy work behind the scenes, and I hope it's not messy in all kitchens, eventually produced this product or the dinner. Now, by all accounts, this book has had a long period of gestation, but given the kind of work that it was required, it's understandable, why it eventually was produced and published in a hardcover, no less. So, I think, Francois, again, it is incumbent on us to congratulate you for taking all the work, all the sacrifices, to do this work for this long period of time. But as was mentioned, there's now a physical record of the club and how it contributed to the Cape society that exists. So thank you very much. It's more, like you said, it's more than a game, it's more than a club. It's just a lot more than that. Thank you and well done again. So, thank you. Last two thank yous for the AV team and for the catering team. Thank you very much. Now I want to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, there are books available over there that you can purchase. I think you should get in line to get your signed copy from the author. Go there as soon as you can before the print run is sold out. Thank you for coming here today and sharing in this very informative and occasion. Over there, you can grab something before you leave. Thank you.